So as most of us know, the 2024 AFL season was not exactly what the Carlton Football Club wanted it to be. Again, after a pretty good 2023 where they were able to, of course, make a preliminary final and legitimately just lose to the team that would, go into the grand final. It was a sad time, but also a lot of optimism was built that they could go on in 2024 to potentially take the next step and contend for a premiership. But of course, we know that wasn't the case. They struggled with a lot of injuries, a lot of continuity, consistency, all of the above, and it just didn't work out. So I think a lot of Carlton fans and the optimistic football fan were probably thinking that the Carlton Football Club were going to have a really good 2025, and this would be the year that they would contend for a flag. Again, after all, I tipped them on my ladder prediction, I think, to finish third. So I've been pretty hype on Carlton, which I've never really been able to say. But this season, I thought they could do something really well in 2025. But of course, now we know a lot of things are already falling apart pretty quickly for Carlton. And there's a lot of really unfortunate things. Again, there are some positive things, which we're going to be talking about all in today's video, because it has so far been a really weird off-season right now in 2025. And you can definitely see that there could be some potential problems already before the season, of course, does go and start. Again, in saying that there's problems, there's also solutions to these problems and previous problems that I think they've already solved, which I'm also going to be talking about. Again, before we do get into all of that and more, there's still a decent amount of you guys who watch these videos who are not yet subscribed to the channel. So if you could do me a massive favor and leave a like on this video to let me know you guys enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel for the latest AFL content. And I guess without further ado, we'll get into some of the very unfortunate news that Carlton have had as of late. Again, one that happened very recently was Carlton's president actually stepping down. Again, a really weird situation, which I don't want to get into too much, but there was a big opinion on the internet for a little bit there that Carlton's president needed to step down. That's what he did. Again, he actually released a statement saying the past 2 weeks have been very tough for everyone who has been impacted by the unauthorized social media post. I did not post the image, either deliberately or accidentally. I fully cooperated with an independent inquiry by the AFL, which concluded the access to my X account was compromised. I am aware of speculation that the naming of another person in the post explains why it happened. It does not, and the narrative is wrong. I am so sorry for the hurt that it has caused. I deeply regret that many other people, including my family, friends, and colleagues, and my football club, have been caught up in this matter. That is why I've decided to step down as the Carlton president and take some time away from work. Leading the Carlton Football Club has been one of the great honours and privileges of my life. I leave knowing the club is in great shape and with the deepest gratitude for its understanding and support. I will now deal with this away from the glare of the public and media spotlight. This decision draws a line in the sand. Again, I'm not exactly too sure what the image is. I don't really want to see it. I don't really care for it unless it's a picture of, Mia Khalifa or a Ballad Angel or something, which, at this rate, by how he described that, it could very well be. But again, I think this situation is over now. A very weird one that has probably affected those at the Carlton Football Club, caused some controversy, and definitely would have probably been chatted about in the group showers at the Carlton Football Club. I can just imagine Jagger Smith showering with Sam Walsh. Pause. This has taken a weird direction. What I was just trying to say is I can imagine these lads talking about it in their free time, and it just got really weird. Enough about that. Let's move on. Positive or negative, whether the way you look at it, but Adam Cerra also signed a 5-year deal with the Blues. Now, I actually think Adam Cerra is a really, really good player. And when he's healthy, I think he's a guy who completely changes this Carlton team. Because we can see in 2024, when he barely played, they really lacked a decision maker and good ball user in that midfield at times. And you could tell they were screaming out for a guy like Adam Cerra. So I think the Carlton management team has very much seen that and we're like, holy crap, we got to re-sign him. Again, the negative about this for some people is he's always injured, and some people are saying that they signed him for 5 years to play 5 games a year. Again, I don't think that's going to be true. I think I actually made a kind of mistake saying he's always been injured. It was mainly just last season. He's had a decent record, and I think that, and I'm hoping he can stay injury-free this year and make a massive difference to that Blues midfield, because they desperately need it. But then, the unfortunate news. One here that says that Nick Newman is out for the season with a ruptured patella. Now, I've always been a little bit of a Nick Newman fanboy. He was one of those weird players that, you know, everyone just has like a little bit of a AFL fan crush on them. I don't really know how to describe it. He was one of those guys back at Sydney, and when I heard that Carlton traded for him, I was like, they just got an absolute steal here. I think he's a very good player and he's going to help them out. Again, it took him a couple of years, but now he's become one of the better halfbacks in the league and an absolute crucial part to the Carlton Football Club team. And now he's no longer there. He will no longer be there in the 2025 season. He is out for the whole entire year. And this sucks. This really does hurt their chances, you know, in finals, because he's one of their best players at the end of the day. It came out of nowhere, him just becoming so good. But again, I've always been a fan of the way he plays, and the role he had on Carlton last year was so crucial in that back line as a ball user, as a defender. Losing him sucks, but what could be worse than losing him is Sam Walsh facing another injury. This time, not a long-term one, but a one we know can be a sticky situation for some players. Again, when they do a hamstring injury and whatnot, it can continue to happen, especially if it's before the season even starts. If a player has had all off-season to train and rehabilitate themselves, get themselves in the best condition they can be in before they go and face the juggernaut that is the 18th place Richmond Football Club, you are in a bit of strife if you usually get injured with like a hamstring or something like that, because that's the time where you shouldn't be necessarily getting injured. You're supposed to be getting match fit, the strength and condition work on all of it. Again, it's usually players are getting injured with their hamstrings during the games because obviously they're much longer. The work, effort, and constant battle is insane, and it's excruciating on the human body. And we see, unfortunate, certain players who just cannot get their hamstrings right as soon as they do them, like a guy like Dion Prestia. He will continue to have problems throughout the year, and I really do touch wood here that this is not a situation with Sam Walsh. Again, he could be out now, let's just say to round 1, round 2, he comes back then. It doesn't really mean that he's going to come back and absolutely dominate and stay healthy, because people think as well, you do your hammy, you don't lose any progress. You definitely do. I mean, the fact is, depending how serious his hamstring injury is going to be, Sam Walsh is going to miss some time of footy. He's going to miss some time of sprinting. It just is really tough to be like, he gets 1 or 2 weeks to prep before the official season, you know, probably starts, and all of a sudden he's back into that game space where he has to put his body to the absolute limits. And again, it's a very big chance that he unfortunately does injure himself again. So I really hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, it sucks. Especially, this is the worst time to do a hammy. Like, this is probably the worst time for him to do it. Again, it's not great. Carlton, they've had a lot of issues so far with the off-season and injuries. But like mentioned in a previous video, there's still a lot of good things happening for Carlton this off-season, which I think will help them potentially still do well and hopefully for them make the finals. A lot of teams seem to find it pretty easy to actually not only play against the Blues, but coach against the Blues, as one criticism that a lot of experts had throughout the season was their midfield was really one-dimensional, and there wasn't a whole load of dynamic in the midfield compared to a lot of different teams out there in the AFL. Again, what people mean by this is when you look at a lot of teams like Port Adelaide, they would have a whole lot of different players in that midfield. You would have the absolute inside and out contested beasts like Ollie Wines, a guy like Zach Butters who could play a little bit more on the outside as well. Again, Connor Rozee, who could not only playing that inside, but move around multiple positions. You'd have Jason Horne-Francis, the big-bodied, tall inside midfielder as well that could push up forward and almost play as like a third tall. You had teams like that who had so much different rotation and flexibility in their midfield. And then you unfortunately had Carlton, who really had a lot of players who kind of played pretty similar and had that similar mold, like those really big inside contested midfielders who relied on the contested possession and clearance work in players such as Patrick Cripps, Matthew Kennedy, etc., etc. Again, for the most part, I think they were missing that flexibility and were really kind of looking for a playmaker, but also another midfielder who could rotate and move all around the ground. Again, Patrick Cripps was, for a lot of the time, the player that they would mostly send forward, and even he was rarely used down there. Matt Kennedy and Sam Walsh would mainly just reside in the inside as well. George Hewitt was in there too, and you could tell they were screaming out for those playmakers like an Adam Chera, who really just unfortunately missed out with injury. Again, Adam Chera was only able to play 13 games for the Blues, and you could tell they were really calling for a playmaker and a really good ball user to come into their team, which Chera has been known to do. Again, this year he was only able to average 19 disposals on 73 disposal efficiency, while in the previous year he averaged 25 disposals per game, an extra 6, and a disposal efficiency of 75%. Again, when they needed a ball user, he was a guy who was really able to come in and play that role. In saying all of this and talking about how Carlton's inside midfield looked really similar with players like Cripps, Hewitt, Sam Walsh, and of course Matt Kennedy, it was very obvious that the Blues needed to change, and luckily enough, I think they actually really listened to the criticism that a ton of people had and decided to do a couple of things. First of all, they made it very well known that they were going to be looking to put Matthew Kennedy up for trade. Again, not that Kennedy's a bad player or anything like that, but his play style is just way too much like Patrick Cripps, and they didn't exactly need that anymore at all. So they put him up for trade, and a team like, the Western Bulldogs were actually able to come in and offer up a trade that the Blues liked. So that was kind of step one that they did, which I think will really help them next season. So with moving on Matthew Kennedy, they obviously needed to replace him, but again, not replace him with another big inside contested player, but a player who can come in and hopefully help out with the ball use in this team, be a really nice two-way runner who will add some speed to this midfield as well. And that's exactly what they did with them trading up to pick number 3 and bringing in Jagger Smith, who is not only a massive ball winner, but also is a really good clearance player who's extremely quick and can really use the ball, which will just add so much flexibility into that midfield. Again, there's been some rumors over the off-season as well that players like Elijah Hollins and Ollie Hollins, obviously the brothers, could be actually moving to play a lot more inside midfielder to add some more rotations throughout the team. Again, as we know, Ollie Hollins actually spent most of his time on the wing, I believe, for the Blues this year and so far in his Blues career, while they brought in Elijah Hollins from the Gold Coast Suns to go back to playing that high half forward role that he was, of course, drafted into. Again, when he was at Gold Coast, he wanted to be a high half forward who can play some inside midfield, but unfortunately at the time he played for Gold Coast in their VFL team, they were playing him a lot off the wing and in a ton of different positions. So with the Blues giving him his first year off the half forward line and eventually getting him into the midfield a little bit more, it looks like that might be a little bit more of a narrative that they're going to paint next year of creating more rotations through that midfield. So for the Blues in 2024 being a very one-dimensional, contested, slower midfield with Patrick Cripps, Walsh, Kennedy, and Hewitt, and really not much of a rotation, it looks like next year now, they're hopefully going to have Adam Chera back at least another 10 or so more games. Again, I think they're hoping he'll play all his footy out next year. So they'll have him coming into that midfield. Of course, Jagger Smith replacing Matt Kennedy, and both the Hollins brothers potentially playing a little bit more on the inside as well. if those rumors are true. Again, I'm not too sure if Ollie Hollands will. Again, I think he's kind of made his mark on the wing opposite Blake Acres, and he's a really good two-way runner as well, and I think will improve on that. So I would say he's more likely going to be there. But I think Elijah Hollands, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe his game gets upgraded to at least 10 to 15% more of some inside midfield, meaning that a guy like Patrick Cripps can eventually go down forward and become another marking option for the team. So I find it very interesting that Carlton have really redeveloped this midfield and changed it a lot. And you could tell that this was a very big point of emphasis for their team, because they really tried to trade up to get a top pick, and they were not only able to do it, but they arguably brought in the best midfielder and the most ready midfielder in the draft in Jagger Smith, who can not only get the ball and be a good clearance player, but he's incredibly quick. He's probably double the speed that Matthew Kennedy is. And I think he might already be a better ball user, which is pretty insane to think, because I think that Blues midfield desperately needs some ball use in there, especially some good players who can make good plays. And again, I think that Jagger Smith adds to that. You're also bringing back in Chera for another hopeful 5 to 10 games, get him off those injuries. That would be really good. And Elijah Hollands, who can just add something a little bit different to that midfield and give them something more and another rotational player. So I think, yeah, Carlton really listen to the fans. They listen to the criticism and the experts, and they've really gone out there to try and evolve this midfield that looked so one-dimensional and slow last year. And I think it's honestly going to help them quite a fair bit. I think there's a big chance that they will go from that 8th position to, hopefully for them, moving back up to contending to be in that top 4 again. But of course, if you haven't already, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for the latest AFL content and news. Don't forget to subscribe to my IRL/vlogging channel and my gaming channel, and comment your thoughts and opinions down below. How do you guys think Carlton are going to go in 2025 with this new reshaped midfield? Again, I'd very much like to know. Of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.